So, Owen and Andrew, you're both very welcome. Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks, Gar.
Before we
Thank
kick off,
you.
I'm just going to talk to you a little bit, Andrew, at the start, and then we'll bring in Olwen. But before we kick things off on Zone 4 and 4, I just wanted to ask about your route into film. You graduated at IFTA and you made quite a name for yourself on commercials and music videos, especially with the likes of The Weeknd, who I'm a big fan of. And a lot of that work, I suppose, with him was inspired on Kissland, was inspired by Philip K. Dick and kind of cyber noir, cyberpunk, that kind of thing. But you also have a kind of familial background with film. I believe your uncle, was it Roy, worked with Ken Russell, and you have a brother who's an editor. So was it always in your blood to become a filmmaker?
I think the person who really introduced me to the movies was my dad, you know, and I grew up watching a lot of British movies and James Bond's, Carry-Ons, and the American movies, you know, similar to what Zone is. You know, I grew up watching these movies, you know. So, and yeah, I mean, my dad was British, and my uncle was a producer, and my half brother Stuart is an editor and a director as well. He went to Hollywood's, Roy stayed in London, and but it was really, I think it was just my dad and watching these movies with him and my brother. We used to watch a lot of stuff, and they were entertainments, you know. We were watching entertainments, and that's what's influenced me more than anything. And but because my family, the British side of my family, were in the movie business, then I suppose it made it more, you know, like it's possible, you know, because back when I was a kid, you know, I mean, it was My Left Foot that really kicked things off here on an international stage in 1989. And so it wasn't even in the realms of possibility, you know, and so that was it. And then at 16, I really made a decision. I wanted to do this. And I remember saying it in school. I grew up in Dunleary, funnily enough, and I went to film school in Dunleary, which is a great place. And I was down in the countryside for 10 years, a little village called Innistea, which is a great little village. But I remember saying it in school in Wexford that I went to. It was called the Good Counsel College, and I wanted to be a filmmaker. And they thought filmmaking was making the film negative. That's how abstract the concept of being a filmmaker was. So anyway, that's it. I decided, and then lo and behold, a movie comes to the little village in Innistea called Widow's Peak with Mia Farrow, and the location manager used to work for my uncle. So that one bit of nepotism got me on a movie the summer before I started Dunleary, the Dunleary Film School. And so that's the one time I got some nepotism, and it was huge experience. John Irvin directed the movie, who turned out to be, he turned out to direct the last movie that the original producer produced, who was going to produce Zone. Unfortunately, he passed away a few years ago and stalled this a little bit, you know, but his wife, Deborah, carried on with me on it, and we resuscitated it, and it got into the hands of a really great producer up in Belfast called Martin Brennan, May 2018. Martin, I started, and then Mark Huffam there wouldn't be a movie without Mark Huffam, and because Mark gave us credence with the talent, and without the talent, you can't make a movie, you know, because this movie is all made on, it's called like debt finance, so it's all pre-sold and stuff. So
well, that's an amazing route from, like, as you said, a small village into IDT to like making a kind of dystopian sci-fi noir in Belfast. Just before we get to that a little bit, you worked with Roger Corman as well, I believe, like so many people in the Irish industry here, and like through Concord and Nish, you have a lot of people at start. Was it design and art direction you were working on there, or what was that?
Yeah, I mean, that's how I started. Because in Dunleary, they said, when I tried to get into Dunleary, there's 3 courses you can do back then, was animation, design, and film. And they'd give me everything but film. So I did the design course to specialize in production design so I could get into film, which is what I did, and they let me do that. But and then I was very fortunate that I've always been an art director, and I come from that. And funnily enough, the kind of godfather of the movie, Mark Huffam, he produces all of Ridley Scott's movies. So the work that, you know, filmmaker does is incredible, and the way he works is, you know, I storyboard, I'm very visual, very prepared, and so yeah, I'm very much a designer who's come in. I come from a conceptual world, and I'm very fortunate. It gave me tremendous training, and I got to work with a lot of other filmmakers, and then as I started to build up my own directing work, I found that I was quite, you know, I'd gone through a lot of experiences that helped me, and seen other people make errors and mistakes, you know, that I avoided sometimes, you know.
Well, that's always very important, and I think that's a great thing of this series, when we can talk to someone like yourself who's a first-time feature director, and you love learning those things, and then I'm sure you learned a lot on Zone 4 and 4 that you can share with someone watching who can, you know, learn from those kind of challenges and your ways to come over them. I'm just, before we get into it, just going to ask you a little bit about your influences, I suppose for Zone 4 and 4, but also in general, like some of your video work for The Weekend was very much kind of Blade Runner influence as well. But I suppose, what filmmakers and films in particular kind of inspired you in that journey? Was it particularly kind of sci-fi and genre? You said the American films and a lot of British films. And I also see a lot of, like Blade Runner, Philip K. Dick and Neil Stephenson, kind of cyberpunk, and William Gibson, I guess, in there as well. Like, were these always something you were interested in, or something you looked at once you were coming to kind of sci-fi filmmaking?
Well, the movie that I saw, I was about 6, that really had a big influence on me was The Time Bandits that Terry Gilliam made. I was about 6. It was just when I'm 45 now, so that was like 1981, and it was the start of VHS. Was it 81 or whatever? I think I saw it around 83, 84, but because it had to come out on VHS, and I remember seeing it, and I was blown away by it. So whenever maybe I was 7 or 8 when I saw it, but just the world he created, and so the worlds of cinema really sucked me in, you know, and that was the beginning of it. I wanted to be able to create those kind of worlds, you know, and obviously being a production designer, that helped, that allowed a chunk of that to happen, but it was part of the world. It wasn't the whole world. And, you know, and I really do love the storytelling aspect of cinema. And that's why, regarding like the Blade Runner is seminal and brilliant as a piece of work as it took me a long time to kind of like get into that movie at all. I mean, so it wasn't something that was like on my speed dial or whatever, you know. I kind of got into that when I was in Dunleary, you know, but it was Terry Gilliam was more, and Brazil, and you know,
and again, very design-led films in a lot of ways, aesthetically anyways.
Yeah. And then Derek Jarman and Ken Russell, because my uncle produced a bunch of movies with Ken Russell, and they did like The Devils, and I got influenced by that because I did a thesis on my uncle, and I got to know about all these wild, weird movies he did in the 60s and the 70s. And Ken Russell was he was the guy. And so that had a big influence on me. There's no doubt about it. Yeah, sure.
Brilliant. And Ken Russell, Terry Gilliam as well, both excellent kind of influences.
Yeah.
Just going to switch to Olwen for a second, because Olwen, you've become, so something of, in addition to your incredible theatre and dramatic work, you've become something of a genre icon, I think, in these kind of films. Like, you're soon to be seen in Texas Chainsaw Massacre, playing the grown-up Sally Hardesty, been in Sea Fever, Night Flyers, Fantastic Beasts, and one of my personal favorite films, Mandy, as well. Is this kind of work something you were always interested in, or is it just something that has kind of come up through your career?
I think, well, actually, a lot of the influences that Andrew has mentioned there would have been influences on me as well, and big interests of mine. But the chance arrival into this particular genre film just happened, I think, because of the whatever I gave off, I don't know. But it's very, and I would say that I wouldn't have been interested in horror, for instance, but yet Mandy's sometimes classed as horror, and Texas Chainsaw definitely is. I never think of those quite as horror, but I was talking to a very interesting writer here in New York yesterday, and he had a very interesting analysis as to you know, how the theatrical ideas, very extreme theatrical ideas, translate through the horror genre. And I thought that was really interesting. He said, you know, there are no other films, or there are very few other films which use masks, for instance, or that amount of blood, and which are not dialogue dependent and all of that. So I've been thinking about all that, thinking, well, maybe there was a sort of a natural path into the genres like Mandy, or, well, Zone 414. What really attracted me was the world and this excising of humanity, I suppose, really interested me. And also knowing and also seeing the kind of visual approach that Andrew was going to take, because I assumed it to be very different. Like when I was cast as Royale, I imagined her a bit like Tilda Swinton in Clayton, you know.
Oh yeah.
And Andrew said, no, I don't want that look. You know, I want this like very much more. I don't know what you describe the visuals of Zone 414, but it's completely non-specific in terms of time and place, and is incredibly rich, actually. So I really love the visual world that he's created. So I was very attracted by that. But yeah, it's just by chance that I've ended up in these, I think. You know?
Well, you're doing fantastically in them, and I always look forward when I see your name attached to, well, most
Thank
things,
you.
but especially a genre piece as well. Let's go back to Zone 414. It's your first feature film, Andrew. How did it come your way as your first feature?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it took like 5 years. I got the script from Brian Edward Hill, the writer. He saw that I did that music video for The Weeknd called Kissland, and he saw that, and I think he sent me the script, and he was with ICM at the time, and we went in to see them, and that's what kicked it off. And I think that was September, October 2014. That's how it began.
Wow.
And I just, yeah, I mean, the great joy of this with the script was the characters were, it was a great read, and the characters were wonderful. There's so many great characters in the script. That's why it's great to have Olwen on this, you know, because Olwen is really a unique talent, and unclassifiable, which is great, you know, and as like Tilda Swinton was kind of like Derek Jarman's muse, and she just of that kind of type. That it's just extra. But I got so many great actors in the movie. So
you have absolutely. We're going to talk about the great cast in a little while.
Yeah,
but it's
fantastic. Great.
But there's something with Brian's script, and I love Brian's work anyway. I've got quite a few of his comic books at home, like Postal, I really like, and he did a lot of work on Ash versus Evil Dead and stuff as well. But in the story, like it's very dark and kind of unsettling, the world there, and proper dystopian. But at the core, there are these two characters who kind of have to help each other navigate the world, and kind of one's human, one's not, but almost helps the human one find his humanity through it. What specifically attracted you to that script?
Well, that was it. I mean, a great world, really interesting characters, but the engine of it is just two lost souls who kind of find each other and help each other. It's just, it's just like it condensed down. You can, there's all the stuff around it and what it means to be human, and what blah blah, and the future of technology and all that stuff. But at the end of the day, it's just like a kind of a, unconventional little love story, but in a way where, there's just two people find each other and help each other, and that's really what it is. And they kind of go through this experience together, that's and that was the heart and soul of it, and my intention always, because with all these Android movies before, like, and again, every time we mention an Android movie, we're mentioning these major Hollywood movies. We had a tiny budget to do this movie, and so, but they all dealt with the kind of the technology, and I didn't want to deal with the technology. I wanted to deal with the emotional side of it. Like being an android is like being like a shut-in, being like some sort of like slave, someone who's been in a kind of abusive environment, and just to deal with the human. It's always to deal with the human. And I thought it was really interesting that you know, at one stage in the script, Royale was male, but we decided to make her female. It was Roy, and we made her female. And I thought, well, isn't it more pertinent and relevant to have the kind of the person who kind of runs the zone be female, like the mistress, like a boarding school mistress or whatever.
Or madame, a madame of a brothel.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course, exactly. And I just,
and madame is a better word. I had cyber pimp written here.
Yeah.
So
Oh, I like cyber pimp.
Yeah, there was always the danger of it. This could have been, and you know, the video I did for the weekend was pretty risque, and Abel wanted to really push it that way. And anyway, whatever, it worked out the way it did. But with Zone, I was always very conscientious of not falling into some misogynistic, even though a couple of reviews said it was, but you know, casting Matilda as Jane, huge, because she did a great job, and she's very petite in person, physically petite, but as a personality and as a spirit, she's very strong. And
it's interesting you mentioned that people bring up misogyny, because like you clearly depict what is a misogynistic kind of world, and there's a lot of really interesting, I suppose, socio-political and kind of gender themes within the film that it explores that I think are really well. And I think sometimes people can see, like, you know, there's a depiction of these things, and that's the same as it being these things. But I want to come to those in a moment. Like, and I love always in sci-fi that it's always not about that world you've created, it's about now and here, and like the cognitive dissonance that allows you to look at themes that are relevant to our time and world. But you mentioned there that it was a very modest budget, but you had a great, as you mentioned as well, production team behind you with like Jim Brennan, Jim Polomus, who I think is your agent as well, Deborah Kolar, and Mark Huffin, you mentioned. And you also had, I think, one of your associate producers was Brendan Mullen, who's made a lot of really good Northern Irish kind of genre pieces as well. How did you assemble that? How did that team come together, and how did you go and, you know, raise those funds then?
Well, I mean, everyone, like Brendan, everyone, like there's so, I mean, I finished shooting a movie in Georgia in March, and we're finishing it now, but in Georgia, in the US, you know, and I mean, if we'd attempted to make Zone there, you know, and it costs more than Zone, we'd have been killed, you know. I mean, Zone is a really complicated movie to make, and everybody, it really is a testament to everyone, both in Belfast and in Dublin, and some people came in from London, and then the talent came from, you know, few different places. And just great. James, the cinematographer, James Mather, Philip Murphy, the production designer, did an amazing job. I mean, I got great talent. Tony Lawson, Tony
Cranston, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Fionnán Higgins on sound as well. Like, it's a great.
I just and I went to Windmill Lane, and it was a real joy to go back to Windmill Lane. Literally, I probably hadn't worked there in nearly 20 years, and to go back in there, and then COVID shut the whole thing down, but we were able to work within Windmill. It was wild. Great. It really, genuinely, the level of craftsmanship and artistry that worked on the movie that came from the island, the whole island, is remarkable. It really is, because I hadn't, you know, I've done a lot of commercials and videos in the US and across the US, and I hadn't done, like, I'd been an art director on movies in the US when I first got there a long time ago. So it'd been a long time. So when I did this other movie that'll be out later this year, I realized how low, depending on your budgets, you know, I mean, usually, like, if you don't have a considerable budget, the Marvel movies take all the great crew, you know. So we were really fortunate, you know. I was really impressed with what was. I'm super proud of it. It really is. It's a remarkable achievement, and it's such a kind of it's a movie. It's not a film. It's a movie. It's like a genre movie. It's done incredibly well. It got into the top 10 on Netflix in the United States. It cost less than $5 million. It's vast majority Irish people made this movie, and I'm super proud of that. And I think we should all be. It shows what you can do and compete on a global stage. And I'd say about 3% of the budget came from soft funding, you know, like government funding from Northern Ireland, you know, and then obviously the tax rebate. So, I mean, as a model like that, I think and I commend like Martin Brennan and Highland in LA. The were brilliant. I mean, and the young guy called Nathan Klinger, the finance guy. There's so many people like made this thing happen. You know, I remember when I first talked to Olwen, I thought the thing was falling apart again. She didn't know that, but I was like, oh God, it's going to collapse again. And it's just, you wouldn't believe what we went through to get this thing going. But once
well, it was kind of seated the pants some of the time. Like I remember, like the one thing I regret is we didn't get a chance to kind of like all rehearse together, because the ideas, we never got a chance to really, you know, I watch it and I go, oh, now I see Royale that stretches there and there and there, but all the stuff that if we were all in a room together, we would have had a chance. But I mean, given the pressures, it's an amazing achievement, you know.
However, the schedule worked out. Actually, it was the only person I didn't get any time with was Olwen. And the first day, James wanted to shoot not the existing light, and the camera is Olwen has to sit down at her desk in Royale's office and run an 8-page scene or something. You know, it was insane.
No rehearsal, straight in.
If it helps, it doesn't look like there was no rehearsal. Let's see.
Yeah, Royale was made in the. We found it as we went along.
Patched it together.
Yeah, no, but it was, you know, yeah, that wasn't fair on Olwen because everyone else got a little amount of time.
Yeah. But I think it would have been great to have all of us in the movie to have been able to be in a room together for a day would have, I think, been wonderful. But sure, it didn't happen.
Something I've heard a lot in these discussions from people who've shot over COVID as well, like just that the things that go are like chemistry tests and rehearsal and stuff, and you just have to like trust your actors. Someone brought up the I think it was John Huston thing of just let your actors act. Like if you can trust, you know, you've got a great cast, you can let them go. And before we get to Olwen, you have a really great cast here. I was not just like Matilda Lutz, you've mentioned, Guy Pearce, with Jonathan Aries, Travis Fimmel, and then an incredible triumvirate, I suppose, of Irish women with Antonia Campbell-Hughes, the brilliant Fionnuala Flanagan as well, and Olwen here as well as Ned Denny, who's another recent genre stalwart.
Yeah, we always end up in the same movies.
Yeah, I was just thinking, it's like a nice kind of two-hander you have there. If I could just ask before I get on to Olwen a little bit, what was the casting process like for you? Did you always have like these certain people in mind for it, or did it change when you were like shooting in Ireland as opposed to potentially?
But sure, I mean, like, you know, like that's the thing with movie, like any piece of anything creative, it changes and morphs all the time. That's why you have to go with it. You know, initially we're going to shoot it in Belgrade. You know, we're very close to going to Belgrade to do it, and then anyway, you can't get a tax rebate on the talent in Belgrade, so it's like so we ended up back in Belfast and went to the Game of Thrones studio, and it was great. But the cast, the talent, it started with Travis. I started with Guy, then Travis. Travis was first firmly committed, and then Guy came on, and then we got Matilda. So that's all the international talent. And then you got to like, okay, we're going to go to Belfast, so we need to source between really Ireland and the UK, and which is not a bad place to source. There's great talent. And Colin Salmon we got, brilliant actor. Johannes Johannesson from Iceland, who's in Valhalla now. He was amazing. I mean, everyone. We got Fionnuala at the last minute because she's good friends with Deborah Kohler, one of the producers. And I just want to, I mean, you cast the best people you can get for the roles and let them run. And as Olwen said, it would have been amazing to have, like, I think we had a dozen talents in the movie, and to see them all in, because we used to use the Game of Thrones studio and the Titanic studios as this enormous conference table, like enormous. And we use that as the boardroom, and it'd be cool to see them all around the table. But we did get rehearsals. We mixed them up a bit, but maybe I didn't get to rehearse with Ned either. Ned was brilliant. You know, everyone was.
They can both be let off, I think. They're both brilliant actors and tax efficient as well.
Yeah. Can I tell them, Andrew, that you'd originally asked me to play Ned's part?
Actually, I don't remember.
You can't remember.
That. Oh wow!
And you were going to rewrite it as a woman, and I said no, leave it as a man, and I'll play it as a man. And then there was a worry about, you know, what that would.
Oh yeah,
the trans aspect.
Well, that's very Tilda Swinton again. I think like Orlando and so forth. That could have worked.
Yeah.
Oh, well, I'll just come to you as well. We mentioned some of your genre work, but you're also like really well known for your theater work and I suppose dramas as well, like Animals, the upcoming Joyride. You did a wonderful short called In Orbit, whose writer director Katie McNeice we're going to be talking to after this, but her new feature film. But you mentioned for this, what really attracted you was the world. What do you generally look for in a script?
Well, I think I usually look for something which I don't actually look consciously for anything, but I think I am attracted to a world which gives us a completely different perspective on our current reality, you know. And I mean, like what's very interesting about Zone 414, you could even think that maybe Guy Pearce's character, I think you could even think that Guy Pearce's character is actually a replicant himself, you know, and it's the replicants who are developing their humanity and the humans who have lost it, and all of those kind of, I love all of those kind of philosophical, quasi mystical bullshit philosophical questions. Really interest me. So I'm interested, like I love The Survivalist, I think is probably Stephen Finkelton's The Survivalist is the best script I've ever read. Just film. That whole you know, that sort of apocalyptic world where nature is surviving but the humans are disappearing, which I think is happening anyway. So I'm attracted to all of those. I think I have a bit of an apocalypse fetish. So I am attracted to real, true apocalypse films.
It's interesting you mentioned The Survivalist, because that's another great example of a dystopia done on a modest budget that's really effective, and great work there with Martin McCann and Mia Goth. I think it's a terrific film as well. But let's go to Zone 414. As we mentioned, Roy, the Madame / cyber pimp, which I'm trademarking, is a bit of a piece of work, but as you said, kind of a fascinating character in like so many kind of almost philosophical kind of ways. Like you mentioned, kind of you thought more of a Tilda Swinton thing, and Andrew had a different idea. How did you approach that character first, and how did that change?
Well, as I said, I thought I was going to be playing George first, and then it was Roy, and I found Roy a lot more difficult to get a handle on. Actually, George I could understand completely, but I found Roy harder to get a handle on, because in a way you don't see in his scenes, you don't necessarily see what is suggested he's capable of, or she's capable of, I should say. And playing it as a woman who has that kind of, also has that quite gentle scene with Matilda, you know, that if I'm to criticize my performance, which of course I always do, I would say that I'm missing that edge. You know, what is it in her that means that they all think she is capable of killing the girl. But I approached it much more like a kind of a, you know, the corporate greed kind of point of view. Somebody who is only really interested in power and what they can get out of it, really. So I kind of thought of her as a kind of corporate boss.
That's interesting, because, and I can't remember, it's in the backstory for a mention, but like I was looking at the film again, I found that she was someone who's kind of top of this, you know, huge kind of thing, but it also felt like someone who, if she wasn't so like cold and driven to this point, would have been a victim herself. And
totally. It's survival as well, corporate boss, but also for a very good reason. Yeah, because totally if she doesn't handle it. I mean, there was a scene where she throws up after that interview with them, or is it before or after that interview? That's not in the film, but you know, that there's this pressure on her all the time to kind of hold it together. And actually, you know, she's just like on a knife edge the entire time for her own survival. And also is very conscious of the kind of thing that goes on, and probably has seen it. And well, like anything, you know, you become formed by the world that you're in, you know.
That's fantastic. That's a great approach there. Let's talk a little bit about the shoot. Andrew, how long did you shoot for in total? You mentioned you were in the Game of Thrones studio up in Belfast, but how long was the shoot in total?
I think it was 22 days. It was super fast.
Wow. It was really fast. Yeah.
Yeah. Schedule with the because the disadvantage of getting great actors, they're super busy. So, you know, trying to schedule them. And so we had to squeeze a lot in, but I used 2 cameras all the time, which James was horrified by, because James is quite I worked with James. James is a brilliant cameraman. Like he was I went to film school with James, and he was ahead of me a few years, but he was him and Robbie Ryan went the kind of art road, you know, and had to go to London to get work, but it was brilliant. But James stayed in Ireland, but James was very commercial, and he was able to, and he succeeded very well, very quickly. And but what was interesting is when I eventually worked with him again, is I realized, oh, he's still quite traditional, and some, you know, everyone's got their process like actors and stuff. So he didn't like the idea of cross shooting. So we were able to, he didn't like the idea of using 2 cameras, but we got around it, and he did a phenomenal job. I mean, and it was, as I said, on a personal note, to be able to come back and work with all these great people and Windmill and the whole lot was really special. And I feel, of course, you're going to get compared. Well, we didn't realize so much at the time, but I didn't. But the amount of comparisons to Blade Runner, but I suppose every dystopian science fiction movie is going to get Blade Runner comparisons. But it seems like Zone got a tremendous amount of attention for it. It got a great push, and I really feel the Netflix thing was a real kind of sign off on like a job well done by everyone, because they kind of were treating it like a much bigger production than it was. And
I've seen in interviews with you that like comparisons to Blade Runner are great, because as you mentioned, you had the catering budget of Blade Runner, I think, to
pretty much, I mean, yeah, I mean, and to have Guy as your first lead in your first movie. Well, James had worked with him before, but he was, I mean, it took a few days for us to find our footing together, but after that he's a master, but as I said, I don't want to shine a light on any individual, every single talent. Even there's 2 people that we got, the girl who played Marlon Veit's daughter, who we had to do a pickup shoot on in COVID because we didn't have enough of her in the movie. She was brilliant. She'd never been in anything before, and she had to shoot herself. All that video stuff she shot herself in COVID remotely. And then the guy Yoren Cook, who played George's right hand. I mean, he was great. He was, and he had to shoot stuff, and Ned had to shoot stuff, because we didn't have enough stuff of like, movie's about a missing person, but we don't know the person. Who is this person? And you need that. So and we were stuck in COVID, and I just decided, let's just use iPhones and stuff and get them to self-record, self-tape. So all of that video snuff, it was like a snuff movie, and it was like, that was all recorded, that's all shot by them.
It's interesting you mentioned that, because it reminded me a little bit of 8mm as well, with Nick Cage, that kind of world. That snuff kind of thing, it hadn't clicked to me quite.
And and then like Royale is like also a bit like a prison warden, I mean, it's a pretty repulsive, repugnant world, and it gets worse as you go, when you get down to George's level. And I suppose to me, it was interesting for these 2 characters like David and Jane to kind of find themselves in this, where they're both at a bottom in their lives, and they're both need help, and they there's a real beauty in that, in the darkness, and then, I mean, and that really is, so all the other characters around them, I wanted to make them as inhuman or just repugnant as possible. They're pathological, all of them. I mean, Royale is totally pathological and psychotic, and whatever. I mean, and to exist in, like, it's like in a prison yard, I mean, that's kind of what it is. And you have to, no matter how fantastical the world is or the story is, you have to find what's the human connection to all of this, so.
Excellent. And like, you really maximized what you had with Belfast. Like, I wouldn't have known it was Belfast in any way when you were shooting it.
Wow.
Like it does really
Amazing.
capture that kind of dystopian kind of element. Olwen, you filmed obviously in Belfast and pretty much everywhere around here, I imagine at this point. How was the shoot for you? How long were you on set for?
Hardly a couple of days, I think. Very, very little shooting. But I've been up in Belfast a lot, because I was up there doing The Northman as well,
Of
which is
course.
coming out in April. So that was quite a long time up around Belfast anyway, and in places like Knockdhu for days, and in the freezing November. But no, I love. I don't know. It's just kind of, there's two places where my work seems to happen at the moment. Is either Belfast or Sydney, Australia. The two places are, I keep moving back and forth.
Nice commute.
Well, Texas Chainsaw was filmed in Bulgaria, of course,
Yes.
but yeah, all during the COVID time as well.
And let's talk a little bit about like what Andrew's talking there about, I suppose, Roy as a character. And guys, thanks for your questions coming in. Please do keep sending them in. I have a lovely one here about Windmill Lane I'm going to come to. But we kind of mentioned like earlier, I think Roy has one of I think my two favorite lines in the film, which is, "What do rich people want? Everything." Sorry, my delivery is clearly nowhere near as good as Owen's would be, but it does kind of speak to some of the kind of more almost kind of class kind of based discussions and kind of socio-political elements to the story. And also, as we mentioned, there's an awful lot of like some of the characters, and like when Colin Salmon's character come in, and I think it's Finial Flanning's character is like, you want a man or a woman and all this, and it's like these things are really traded as things and stuff, and it speaks to that. Was that something you were conscious of making sure was conveyed through it, or were you happy to let space for people to interpret?
Were you asking?
Oh, sorry, Andrew. Apologies. Sorry.
Right.
Sorry, that was me rambling there. Apologies.
You're gonna have to repeat the question. Sorry, mate.
No worries, Andrew. Sorry, that was my fault. I got lost in my own thoughts there on that. Like there are some like you could, like as we're talking about with Olwen about the kind of philosophical things about this world that's created here. And there's that great line where, "What do rich people want? Everything." And I think it kind of speaks to an awful lot of like the themes in the film, which is, you know, like these ownership of these things that are actually people for all intents and purposes. And like I think it's quite rich for discussion on those terms. Was that something you're always conscious of keeping front and center, or was it just let people have their own kind of interpretations of it, leave enough space for that?
Sure, it's like whatever my intentions are inconsequential now, because it's out there in the world, and let people interpret as they wish. But you know, Marlon Veet is just the ultimate repulsive, addictive, like it's more is more, you know, like a guy who's a human. The thing with Marlon Veet, and like Travis was pretty bold to do this. Anyway, Travis is great. They're all great. I don't want to highlight one in particular. Every one of those actors I'm so thrilled to have gotten to work with. I have a great capacity to work with talent, and that with my visual sensibilities, but I really love the actors. I really love working with these actors. And as Olwen said, it's a shame we didn't get to work in more rehearsals, but we will on a project down the road. And Marlon Veet is just what's the word, like a titan, like of grotesque, and not dissimilar to Trump or whatever, where it's like you get, or like an addict where you can never get enough. You're like Roman. It's like Roman. He's like a Roman ogre or something, and capable of anything. And it's like he's trying to fill a hole that he'll never fill. And as brilliant as he is, the android, he's able to create a world that he has complete and total control over. And rather than have human slaves, he has mechanical ones. But he does kind of, I mean, Royale is a slave, you know, I mean, to some degree. I mean, she, you know, I don't know why this just came into my mind, but something like Oliver Twist or something, where it's just like, it's one of those kind of worlds though, that she gets the scraps of whatever she can make for herself. But that's the thing with Olwen, and it was with Royale and Marlon. We did pull on Mickey Rourke. I mean, it was Travis's idea to go with what Mickey Rourke did to himself, but
that makes a lot of sense, actually.
Yeah, but it's like you're changing who you are. Like, I'm not, you're becoming almost like a different person, you know, visually and maybe emotionally. So we don't, the likes of Marlon and Royale, whether they're male or female, it doesn't matter. You know, it's not about, it's all of these personalities. Same with George. God only knows what George gets up to, you know? I mean, so it's more to do with like, it's more to do with kind of feeding into the dark side of the human psyche. You know, that's what this world represents. Now, dangerous it is. If you have everything you want, where's that going to take you? You know, down a dark hole. And then Jane represents this kind of bright, this little light in the tunnel, this naive, kind of a naivety, like a kid, you know, and the wonderment and the joy, which kind of sparks something in David with like where he has a shred of integrity left, you know, and it's just, that's really, for me, that's what all this was about. It's just like, how does humanity survive? Because it will. It'll, like, goodness are, you know, in people will survive, you know, like, you know. Yeah.
You're talking to someone here with an apocalypse fetish.
I think you're better off creating the robots that have the goodness.
Well, you've just reminded me of another line in the film, and I can't remember who said it, and I'm going to butcher this, but it's like when God creates something, he wants it to be fragile, but when humanity does it, it's like permanent or forever, or something like that. And it's kind of like this kind of thing about, it's weird because it almost feels like the inverse in the film, where we have this disposable culture on things, and now we're going to apply that to what are things with souls, essentially.
Yeah. Royale does say that. She said, when God makes when God makes something special, he makes it fragile. Yeah, that's something like that. Can't remember exactly the line. Yeah, it is. I had loads of great lines. I mean, there's fantastic writing in it, you know, some really, really interesting ideas in the whole thing from Brian.
The thing was with Zone as a, and this is the thing with movies that are, you know, filmmaking, I suppose, it's like the script was great, you know, and it was so great, and the characters were great, and Brian's writing is great. But Brian initially wrote that script to do himself, like, you know, for nothing. So it was quite staged, and there was like 8-10 pages of dialogue scenes, you know, big scenes. So, and I loved the script, so I wanted to keep it as is. But once we had it all shot, we started putting it together. So we need to move this quicker. This needs to move quicker. Because what can read great on a page and attract great talent that it did, when you, even like there was times like, you know, the scene between Matilda and Johannes, I mean, the first cut on that scene ran about 12 minutes, 15 minutes, something like that, because it was like a 10-page scene. And it was showing her unique ability to kind of manipulate and whatever. And we cut it down to 3 minutes, and that's what it needed. Like it needed, otherwise that's the magic of movies. You just don't, that's why I'm saying, like, it can work. Of course, the blueprint is the script, and it's got to work on the page to begin with, but you have to keep growing it. And of course, like, Olwen was going to play George, and then she played Royale, and we shot.
But it's an iterative process. Like, that's the beautiful thing about a great script like that. It's a brilliant thing in itself, but it is still just the starting point that you're to build and evolve from. Like, I think that's brilliant. We got time for a few questions here from people, but I was going to go and start talking about the VFX a bit, but we actually have one in from Miguel Escobar, which is a fantastic name. He says, "Hi, Andrew. I know Windmill Lane worked on the VFX for your film. From your experience, I would like to hear your opinion on the industry's future regarding VFX and virtual production." I'm assuming he means here in Ireland, but in general, I think that'll be quite interesting.
Well, John Kennedy was the visual effects supervisor, and John I got John to do all the second unit with a great guy up in Belfast called Phil Carruthers and his team. To do all the drone stuff, you know. So we had another unit running as well in those days. You know, the shoot, we had to, you know, so like a second unit. So John Kennedy, brilliant, really talented guy. And So yeah, and this I think was a good piece for Windmill to do, and they did it, and they did a great job in COVID and all. And I don't know. I mean, I personally prefer to do as much in camera as possible, and you know, I said that. You know, John and I agreed about that. Like, you know, plus there's budgetary. Often it's like still more affordable to do it in camera than to do it in post. You know, and so I'm old school. I'd much rather do it in camera than do it in post. But what we did is we added on to stuff, you know, and that's why we were able to create kind of more dystopia in Belfast than kind of existed, particularly in the scale of it. But I was impressed. I was kind of, how am I going to make this movie in Belfast? But then when Martin Brennan sent me the location deck, he had a guy go out and scout it. I was like, wow, this is okay. Because Belfast went through this institutionalized, kind of militarized, you know, so there was plenty there to use, you know. And so all I can say about Windmill and its visual effects department and stuff is, like, I mean, I think it's world class, and they did an incredible job. And it's just, yeah, I mean, I fought so hard on this new movie I'm doing to bring it to Windmill and not do it in the US, because I knew it would be taken care of properly. And, you know, look, honestly, I'm super impressed. I think in any department, not just visual effects, that look, the Irish filmmakers now can do it as good as anyone. I mean, you know, I mean, they're
absolutely,
really,
and like your own film, like we box well above our weight. Olwen, if I could just ask you a similar question, I suppose you've worked on a lot of productions we've talked about as well, and like the crew base here is fantastic, and like the creative talent we have is absolutely amazing as well. And have you noticed like a change over the last number of years in, like, not just the amount of work, but like in the quality of output and the quality of crew and cast?
Yes, enormously. I mean, when the film industry, for want of a better word, kind of started in Ireland, kind of around my left foot, I was really, and you know, then all the tax incentives and all that kind of stuff, I was really excited, because I thought, oh, fantastic, you know, Ireland will have a, you know, a film culture. And then was very disappointed for years, because I felt it was just following the Hollywood model, you know, and wasn't kind of it wasn't connecting itself to Europe in a way that, you know, the European tradition much closer, and there would have been much more to be gained in going down that route, I would have felt. And now I've really seen the shift in the aesthetic and in the approach and in the kind of mixing up of genres, and the filmmaking being much less formulaic than it has been, and also more indigenous. Are we indigenous? Much more local, you know, Irish people being involved, and much more Irish actors being involved, because there was so many situations where films would come over here and they'd be completely cast in America, and the Irish actors, some brilliant Irish actors, would be just offered these bit parts. There was no kind of integration, I suppose, of the artistic world into, and now I really feel that shift happening, and a lot more collaboration as well. Like, I mean, for instance, in March, I'm going up to, you know, develop a film with a director and a writer and everything like that, and all of that's happening so much now. It's fantastic, and it's probably thanks to the Dún Laoghaire School, partly, and just to a kind of, like, you know, an education in the film world, really, you know. So it's really exciting to see. I just wish I was, you know, starting off now instead of finishing off.
No, there's plenty left in it, but I do like what you say about it. Kind of took a while to find its feet. I always look at it like, we started learning the 12-bar blues, and now we can do jazz a little bit.
Yeah, exactly.
We've got another question in here from Marion Walsh, who says, congratulations on the film and the incredible success of being top 10 on Netflix in the US, which is a huge achievement. It just seems so different these days, what qualifies as success for a film, and obviously getting that many eyeballs on it is amazing. But how did that feel for you, how did that feel for you, that kind of success on Netflix, and knowing that amount of people are watching it or choosing to watch it even in the first place? Andrew?
I mean, honestly, as I said, like, you know, because when it came out, some of the critics were pretty hard on the movie, but you know, I obviously don't make movies for critics. I make them for, like, as I said, I grew up watching these kind of entertainment, you know, but obviously I like to infuse these entertainments with hopefully a degree of elevation. So it's not just gack, you know, but I want to entertain and I want to bring people on a good journey. And it was great. It was huge. And like, no offense, but the United States is the market. You know what I mean? It's like, that is the pinnacle in terms of like, you know, there's 350 million people there. So God only knows how many people watched that movie in that first week or two. It was in the top 10. But they, you know, to complement Saban, the US distributor, they did the deal with Netflix and they got it out on New Year's Day, which is a big release day. I mean, so it's like Rocky, you know, it was like, there was 10 movies, 5 Netflix originals, 4 big studio movies, and then there's Zone. And I think because Universal Pictures has Zone in a lot of the foreign markets. It's actually Universal Content Group, which is part of Universal Pictures. So people can say, oh, maybe they, I don't know, whatever, they had a much bigger infrastructure. They did a great job. Everybody did. But I was thrilled to bits. That really kind of, I suppose this is the last kind of chat I'm having about the movie, I think. And Netflix put the cherry on the cake. It really kind of said, this is what I intended to do in terms of I wanted to make a movie that got out there and with great people, and which it has lots of international people. Obviously, Guy and Travis are Australian. Matilda's kind of not New York, American, Italian. And it's a mix and match, but it really, in its nutshell, it is an Irish movie, you know, I mean, and it gives me great pleasure, more so for everyone who worked on it, to be like, you know, there you go. And it's like, I just want anyone who's out there trying to make those kind of movies to know that you don't have to wait for permission, okay, from a government body, because the movie business is a business. It's the talent that drives these movies. And if you have good material, you're going to get some quality talent and you're going to be able to make those movies. So don't wait for permission. If, you know, you don't have to fit in, as Olwen said, you can fit in wherever. I have a foot in European, like I said, and I have a foot in Hollywood, you know, and I love that. I think Olwen's a bit like that. Whether she likes it or not, she's fallen into this bizarre
I'm in the middle.
role. And that's what I found so interesting. And then she's a performance artist and she's in theater and she's going to probably make a movie herself, I'm sure. And who knows, that's what's so fascinating about Olwen, and it's interesting that she's on the chat with us today. But I just wanted to say that you know, the movie got made because I made a decision that I was going to make it no matter what. And if as a filmmaker, you got to make a decision. It's a really hard thing to do, you know, you don't, unfortunately in Ireland, a big part of the game is waiting for permission from a government body. And I'm just saying you don't need to do that. And just because I ended up in LA it was Martin Brennan in Belfast that really triggered this into production, you know, and then Ireland. And I just want people to know that. And because I know there's a couple of movies on here. There's a guy I know from 20 odd years ago, Graham Cantwell, who just went and made a movie for nothing.
We're actually speaking to them at 4 o'clock today.
Yeah, so I just want great films get made by people who have absolute conviction to their vision.
Yeah.
Whether you like it or not, whether it succeeds or not, to be a filmmaker is to be ruthless in your pursuit of telling that story. And you don't ask for permission from anyone. You either, if you want, and the thing as well is, versus 30 years ago, you can make a movie now on this. Yeah. So you don't need, you know, and you can get out there and just do it, you know, and that was my intention. I would have made this movie for 10% of the budget if I had to. And there was times where I was nearly going to, but then it turned out to be bigger than I anticipated. So that's it.
Well, that's a fabulous way to wrap these things up. I think, Andrew, that was brilliantly said and really good advice for any filmmakers tuning in. And just to, at the risk of comparing it to Blade Runner one more time, like Blade Runner was not well received, was a big flop, and then it was made a huge impression on the VHS market. And I think it's really, really gratifying to see something like Netflix now, which can really give something like that kind of draw to audiences and stuff and really give it a life. I think that's wonderful. And congratulations again. Before we wrap up, I just want to see, what are you both on next? Maybe Olwen, we'll start with you. You've been incredibly busy, it seems, as well, and we're going to see you next in Texas Chainsaw. So is there anything else you're particularly excited about us seeing you in?
Well, Texas Chainsaw, yeah, that comes out on February the 18th on Netflix. I don't know which Netflix. I mean, well, it's just the US one, I'm not sure. And then The Northman, which is premiering April the 8th. So that was a great experience to be able to work with Robert, because I'm a huge fan of his.
Robert Eggers, great director.
Yeah, Robert Eggers, yeah. And I'd kind of, it was a tough shoot, but I'd do anything for him. You know, he was one of those. We all had a tough shoot, but he's just amazing. So they're the things that are coming out. I'm still diversifying as usual. I'm working on another project with Jessie Presley Jones. You know, when I collaborated with her on Ireland's representation at the Venice Biennale 3 or 4 years ago in the visual arts, and we're making another piece called The Tower. And I'm also going to be developing with Dave Tynan has asked me to work with him on a new movie, myself and a few other people. So we're going to develop that together. We're going to spend about a week's development on it in March, I think. So I don't know when we'll actually start shooting, but it's great to be able to get involved at that early stage of it, you know, and to contribute to that. And what else? Yeah, I'm doing quite a few recording things. I've been working with Ian Lynch of Lancome and George Brennan, the composer, on an album that they're bringing out. So It's been great to work with two of them. It's been really fantastic. So I'm trying to persuade them to let me do more with them now.
Well, I look forward to seeing all of that. It sounds absolutely an amazing variety of work. And Andrew, for you, you've another film, if not two, I think, kind of in your computer in the works.
Yeah, we're finishing this crime movie and again, it's another Irish American. It started in Ireland. It was an Irish script by a writer called Ben Conway, who Olwen knows, and super script called One Way, and it got transported to the US. And we have Kevin Bacon and Travis Fimmels in it, and again, and Machine Gun Kelly is the lead, and it's Coulson, who's a talented actor, and we have a great African American actress, Storm Reed. I'm super.
Oh, I love Storm Reed.
And it was a very hard shoot because we were doing it in the height of COVID in Georgia. We shot it in February last year or whatever. I'm getting confused for 2021, and it's a crime movie about a kid that runs off with a bunch of money and drugs and jumps on a bus and tries to get out of Dodge, and he's got a bullet wound. He's bleeding out on the bus, and he's got to sort out his family fast, you know, before he perishes. And
that sounds amazing.
I mean, it's a very contained piece that I opened up a bit. Super talent. I'm very proud of it. We're about a month away from finishing it. Brutally difficult shoot, very hard to finish it. Windmill Lane, more than even Zone. I don't know, we would have gotten into trouble without Windmill Lane on One Way. And then Saban have it for the US, and it'll come out in October. A lot of heat on it because of Coulson and even Storm, I was just in London, and her billboard is, I think she's the face of L'Oreal. Is it L'Oreal? I don't know. Anyway, she's doing great as well. And Kevin is just a total pro. Yeah. And Travis is phenomenal in One Way. So that's that. And then I have a third movie. I mean, there was a bunch of things coming in, but I know what the third one is, and it's going to be a project with Martin Brennan and Mark Huffam. But again, we're most likely going to shoot it in Georgia or possibly Alabama, and in the summer. And we're going to be announcing the cast shortly. So
well, that's fantastic, and like
Yeah.
it sounds like you both have a lot of incredible work coming up that I think us here in Ireland and the Academy will be very, very excited to look forward to. Guys, I've really enjoyed talking to you both about Zone 4 and 4. Thank you so much for your time, and thank you at home for tuning in. We have another one of these screen discussions coming up at 4 o'clock with Graham Cantwell and Katie McNeese and the cast and crew behind Who We Love, which Andrew referred to earlier. So please do tune in for that as well. And we've got another 5 of these next week, starting with Dinion on Monday. And then we've got Redemption of Rogue Tuesday. Please keep an eye on IFTA.ie for more. But for now, Olwen and Andrew, thank you both so much again, and best of luck with your myriad projects coming up. It's been lovely to talk to you.